What would you do if the sun disappeared? Not for minutes, not for days, but for years. 74,000 years ago, the supervolcano Toba erupted with a power so vast it reshaped the destiny of our species. Its plume of ash climbed more than 20 miles into the upper atmosphere, spreading outward like a grey ocean suspended in the sky. Within days, the world's light dimmed. Within weeks, daylight itself seemed to retreat. The sun became a pale, ghostly disk behind a veil of volcanic dust. Shadows blurred, colors faded. The world slipped into a twilight that refused to lift. For the small bands of early Homo sapiens, scattered across Africa and South Asia, nothing felt familiar anymore. The steady rhythm of sunrise and season anchors of their entire existence collapsed into a dull, endless grey. Plants stopped sprouting. Birdsong quieted. The horizon took on a bruised, heavy glow, as if the sky itself were wounded. And in that strange half-light, our ancestors felt a fear they had no words for. A fear older than language. A question whispered across darkened landscapes, carried from one firelit camp to another. Is this the end of the world? The ash did not remain in the shadow of Toba. High-altitude winds swept the plume across the Indian Ocean, then westward over the Middle East, and deep into the heart of Africa. What began as a single eruption became a drifting blanket of microscopic volcanic glass, settling slowly over thousands of miles. Ash fell into riverbeds and wetlands, coating reeds, stones, and drinking pools with a fine toxic dust. Water sources turned cloudy and bitter. Animals grazing along ancient migration routes choked on contaminated plants, coughing until they weakened and collapsed. Hunters followed familiar tracks, only to find silence. No hoofprints, no rustling grass, no promise of prey. Landscapes that once rang with life now felt eerily foreign. Colors dulled. Scents vanished. The world became muted, grey, stripped of the sensory cues humans had relied on for generations. Even the air felt heavier, thick with an invisible grit. Our ancestors would have blinked against the sting of ash in their eyes, tasting the sharp, metallic bite of sulfur on their tongues, daily reminders that a catastrophe far beyond their understanding was spreading across the horizon, reshaping the world with every passing breath. As sulfur aerosols spread through the upper atmosphere, the planet cooled with startling speed. Changes that should have taken centuries unfolded in only a few seasons. Some regions may have dropped 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, an almost unthinkable plunge for early humans who lived entirely off the land. Rains weakened into thin, sporadic drizzles. Monsoons collapsed. Lakes shrank into muddy basins. Rivers slowed, then retreated. Far to the north, glaciers advanced like silent walls of ice. Warm savannas that once supported herds of gazelle and antelope hardened into cold, brittle plains. Grasses withered, trees stood bare. The wind carried a sharper bite, warning that the world had shifted into a new, hostile phase. Our ancestors suddenly faced an ice age, born not of slow geological cycles, but of violent atmospheric chemistry. They had no stored food, no crops, no granaries, only simple shelters of wood, hide, and earth to shield them from the cold. Survival became a daily negotiation between hunger and hope. Each sunrise offered a chance to endure. Each nightfall tested their strength against a world growing colder by the hour. Volcanic winter struck the base of the food chain with ruthless precision. With sunlight smothered by global haze, photosynthesis faltered. Plants across the savannas yellowed, wilted, and collapsed into the soil. Shrubs dried out. Fruit trees offered only brittle leaves. Insects small, unnoticed, yet essential, declined sharply as their food sources vanished. The quiet hum of forests and grasslands faded into stillness. Grazing animals suffered next. Herds wandered farther for every mouthful of grass, ribs appearing beneath their hides. Many starved where they stood. Predators held on briefly, feeding on the weak, but they too fell to the collapsing chain of life. Across Asia, entire species may have disappeared from regions they once dominated. For humans, every loss cut deeply. Fewer tracks meant fewer hunts. Fewer berries meant fewer meals. The land grew eerily quiet, no cracking branches, no distant herds, no promise of tomorrow. With each vanished herd, humanity's margin for survival thinned to a dangerous edge, reminding early people that the world itself was beginning to unravel. For small bands of early Homo sapiens in eastern Africa, hunger became the rhythm of life. Children cried through cold nights, their stomachs aching with an emptiness fire couldn't warm. Adults rationed every scrap of dried meat, stretching thin pieces across days, hoping tomorrow would bring a hunt or a scavenged carcass. People traveled farther than ever, following faint traces of game-blurred hoofprints, scattered droppings, a snapped branch into unfamiliar and often dangerous terrain. Every journey carried the fear that returning empty-handed meant another night of gnawing hunger. When starvation pressed hardest, humans turned to whatever remained. Bones left by predators were cracked for marrow. Roots were dug from stubborn soil. Insects beneath bark became precious calories. Even bitter plants, once ignored, were chewed simply to quiet the pain. This was no brief crisis. It was a slow, grinding hunger that lasted years, reshaping behavior, migration routes, and family bonds. Hunger taught caution. Hunger taught cooperation. And it pushed humanity toward new lands and new strategies for survival. Genetic evidence suggests something almost unimaginable. The global human population may have fallen to only a few thousand survivors. Every voice, every story, every bloodline reduced to the size of a small town. Yet the people living through it had no idea how rare they had become. They only sensed the world growing quieter. Fires that once dotted distant hillsides no longer burned. Camps that once echoed with laughter and argument lay cold, their ashes scattered by the wind. Footpaths faded into overgrown trails, as if entire communities had stepped off the map. Loneliness took on a new shape. The sounds that once defined human life, children playing, hunters calling, songs under the stars dissolved into memory. Families walked for days without meeting another group. Even the comfort of knowing others existed somewhere began to slip away. Humanity balanced on a razor's edge between endurance and extinction, held together only by resilience, fire, and fragile kinship. Survival became not just a physical struggle, but an emotional one. And somehow, these few thousand people carried the future of our entire species. As food sources collapsed, early humans did the only thing they could: they moved. Some bands drifted south toward coastal refuge zones where tides still offered shellfish and seaweed. Others pushed inland, following the last surviving herds across landscapes, turning colder and more unpredictable with each passing season. These migrations were not heroic journeys. They were forced marches with no promise of safety. Rivers in colder regions froze into jagged barriers. Storms swept across open plains, tearing apart shelters and scattering families. Entire groups vanished along these routes, their trails ending abruptly in ash-covered earth. Yet movement itself became a form of resilience. Those who kept walking, who refused to remain in dying lands, often found the small ecological pockets where life still held on. Sheltered valleys warmed by shifting winds, estuaries rich with nutrients, rocky coastlines alive with crabs and tidal pools. In these rare fragments of abundance, humanity reorganized. Families gathered, shared food, traded knowledge, and rebuilt fragile networks of cooperation. Step by step, migration carved the first pathways toward humanity's survival. Stress does something remarkable to the human mind. it forces invention. During the post-Toba crisis, when hunger and cold closed in, early humans began to experiment in ways they never had before. Stone blades were shaped with greater care, flaked sharper to stretch every hunt a little farther. New tracking methods emerged, and cooperation between small groups became essential as animals grew scarce. Shelters that once served as simple lean-tos were reinforced with clay, woven grasses, and thicker hides to withstand colder winds. People dug deeper into the earth, built walls against rock outcrops, and sealed openings to trap precious heat. Fire became the center of life, warmth, protection, and a symbol of control in a world losing its stability. Some communities began storing food in pits lined with ash or clay, early attempts at preservation that bought them days, sometimes weeks, of extra survival. Others turned to bone, hardened wood, and heated stone to craft stronger tools. Innovation wasn't a luxury. It was the lifeline carved from fear, hunger, and necessity, proof that even in darkness, the human mind kept reaching forward. When the world shrinks, conflict often grows. Yet during the Toba Bottleneck, something different may have happened. Facing hunger, cold, and isolation, small human groups began to cooperate in ways earlier generations never imagined. Families shared what little they had, scraps of dried meat, a working tool, a burning ember carried between camps. These exchanges weren't acts of generosity. They were acts of survival. Sharing food meant one more warm body beside the fire. Sharing tools meant one more hunter capable of returning with a kill. Alliances began to form across family bands. Groups that once lived separately started traveling together, pooling knowledge about shifting animal routes, dangerous river crossings, or shelters hidden in stone outcrops. In those harsh years, community became as essential as fire. Rituals may have taken root as well, stories told at night, symbols drawn in ash, warnings passed from one group to another. These shared traditions helped bind people together, reminding them that they weren't facing the darkness alone. In a world stripped of certainty, human connection became the most stable resource they had. Cooperation wasn't just kindness, it was the strategy that kept our species alive. Volcanic winters do not last forever. After years of dim skies and muted horizons, the darkness finally began to lift. At first, sunlight returned in thin, uncertain rays, weak, pale, almost ghost-like, but to early humans, even that faint glow felt like a promise. Plants responded quickly. Grasses pushed through ash-layered soil. Shrubs sprouted new shoots. Trees unfurled small, trembling leaves. Rivers cleared as sediment settled, and water once again reflected the sky instead of swallowing it. Animals returned cautiously to recovering fields, gazelle testing fresh meadows, birds tracing old routes, predators following the herds they once depended on. But this was not the same world. Toba had rewritten ecosystems, shifted migration paths, and altered where life could thrive. For humans emerging from this long twilight, the brightening sky must have felt like myth becoming real, a second birth of the world, and a quiet signal that survival was once again possible. Those who survived the Toba aftermath were not simply lucky, they became the genetic foundation of nearly all humans alive today. The adaptations they carried, the choices they made, and the resilience they hardened within themselves shaped the future of our entire species. The Toba Bottleneck is more than a geological event. It marks a turning point in human evolution, a moment when the species was pushed to the edge and forced to redefine what it meant to survive. In the face of hunger, cold, and isolation, our ancestors learned to cooperate more deeply, to innovate more boldly, and to explore farther than any humans before them. The crisis refined us. It stripped away what was fragile and strengthened what was enduring: ingenuity, empathy, communication, and the ability to adapt under pressure. From a population small enough to vanish, humanity discovered its greatest asset, the capacity to turn vulnerability into power. In the ashes of disaster, our species learned a profound truth: fragility, when met with courage and creativity, can transform into strength. Even today, faint echoes of that ancient catastrophe linger within us. They live in our DNA, in old stories whispered around fires, in myths about endless nights, and in our instinctive fear of hunger and long winters. Some part of us still remembers a world where the sun dimmed, where the sky turned gray, and where survival depended on cooperation, courage, and a single burning flame. Toba did not erase humanity. It carved us. It shaped the mind that invents, the heart that endures, and the bonds that tie families and communities together. From a population small enough to vanish, our ancestors learned what resilience truly meant. They learned to adapt, to move, to dream past the darkness pressing in around them. On the edge of extinction, they discovered endurance. And in the coldest twilight, they learned to imagine a future worth walking toward, a future that would one day become us. The shadows of Toba still live within our species, not as fear, but as memory. A reminder of how close we came to fading, and how fiercely we chose to continue. In the aftermath of Toba, humanity stood small, frighteningly small yet unbroken. Their footsteps, fragile and few, carried all of us forward. As we explore these deep origins, we uncover not only ancient struggles, but the blueprint of our resilience. If you'd like to continue this journey through the hidden chapters of human prehistory, join us here on Prehistoric Shadows, where the past still whispers and every shadow has a story.